Hey guys, I'm Noel Salas for the Surfboard Empire. Hey guys, welcome to Surf and Show. I'm Noel Salas, and today's surfboard review is on the Subdriver 2.0 by Lost Surfboards. Now I've got special guest Nate Yeomans to help me with the board breakdown. This is going to be fun. Sit back, get your favorite drink, enjoy the show. All right, so hey, I never had the privilege of riding the original Subdriver. Obviously, you being with Lost. Yeah, I know. I kind of feel deprived, but that's okay. Stoked to get on the Subdriver 2.0. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences and the changes that were made as we go along through this board breakdown on the Subdriver 2.0?
Yeah, we could take it back. So 2012, I want to say, is when Matt originally came out with the Subdriver. And that was a board, I think Kaloe worked a lot with them because he was doing the QS at the time. It was coming out of NSSA and then going to the QS, which could be tough competition. Sure. And around that time is when I started riding it and basically became my go-to board. I had epoxies, stringered epoxies boards, this is before Lightspeeds, and poly boards that I rode all over from Bali to small Hawaii, California. I love the board. And the old version was pretty narrow through the nose. It was really flat in the center and it had more bend in the tail and the top of the nose, so it kind of went like this and then flipped up. And so when Matt said he was making a 2.0, I was pretty excited because that was the Subdriver itself was one of my favorite boards he made, and it's been really fun. There's been changes and it took a little adjusting. Like I said, I really knew the old board. I ordered it all the time, so I just went with the same dimensions on the 2.0, and at first it felt a little long, the board itself. So I actually took my boss's board, who had a 510, and I used to ride the 511. And once I got on that, I was like, oh, this thing's money. So yeah.
Okay, so speak to the changes of the 2.0. I know that's a little bit wider in the nose and a little straighter outline. And I experienced the same thing you did. So this is my Subdriver 2.0 in the PU Poly in the Pro Dims, stock 5.8. Which is relatively long for me for a small weight performance board. I even like my high performance short boards no longer than 5.9, and I'll ride them around 5.7. So I thought, okay, we'll start 5.8. That kind of hits my numbers. When the waves are head high and bigger, I like the 5.8. I'll utilize that rail line to my advantage and be able to settle the rail down and more drive through my turns.
Yep.
But when the waves were smaller, like head high and under, it felt long to me. And that's what I was telling Ben over at Lost. The board feels long in small waves, and this is supposed to be a small wave performance board.
Yep.
Kind of like what you said.
Yeah, and the cool part is this: you have the show. So if you're going to go purchase a board, you can, listen to us that have gotten to ride the board. As I said, I usually rode a 511, and now I'm riding a 510. But with that wider point up here, it's going to straighten that rail line. And instead of it being really narrow and turning tight in the pocket, it's wider and straighter. So to cut down an inch, which isn't that much realistically, but it was crazy how much it changed the feel of the board. It just felt, for a small wave board, it felt that straight rail line seemed like it didn't fit a small little pocket. But cutting an inch off, and it just gave the board a lot more liveliness. He also put more volume in the center of the board in the stringer, or where this Lightspeed would be. So that's also going to, the cool part is it gives you a lot of paddle power, and with more width up here, it does the same thing.
Sure.
And a lot of those changes were the young kids that do all the airs and land backwards and doing tricks. There's just more stability for those moves. And if you're not quite there and you're paddling and want to get into the wave, my dad has a 6.5, which is a pretty short board for him, but he really likes it because it has that glide with more volume in the center, and also a wider point up front, and he's able to get to the wave, and the board has the glide so he can get to his feet, and then he gets going.
Sure.
But I think it was a great adjustment. You just got to adjust the length of your board, especially on, like, for me and you, at the top end of performance. You want to push your board, and going a little shorter, I think, ties into the updates that he made.
That's good. And then you mentioned that it has a lower rail also, because it has the more foam in the center.
Yeah.
And one of the things I experienced on my 5.8 PU poly is the waves were a bit overhead and it had some texture. It was windy, choppy, and I'm going fast. And the lower rail on the Subdriver 2.0, I could bury it, hold it, and I'll struggle with that at times. Going that fast and go to really settle bottom turn, that chop, I'll try and disengage my rail, and then I'll have to reset it again. But there was also the change, and you mentioned that there was more flip in the original Subdriver in the tail.
Yep.
This has less rocker, centerline rocker, but with more rail curve, more rail rocker.
Yep.
And I could experience the hold and traction in the bump and chop.
Cool.
Now, remember what, a week or two ago, there was some bombs coming in, and you were riding a Subdriver 2.0.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how big it was out there. And this is a small wave performance board. Those waves were well overhead.
Yeah, it was probably the biggest south swell of the summer, I'd say. And the week prior was the Jack's Pro event in Huntington. And in the beginning of the week, there was waves, but it got small. But I rode it the morning, the second day of the contest, and it was probably Huntington Beach this big.
Right. And
the board just had glide, and I felt like it turned well in the pocket, but more so it carried its speed to those kind of broken up sections of Huntington Beach. Which pretty rad, because I took it the next week to lowers. It's kind of as big as it gets, and I wasn't having to really baby it. Usually a small wave board, you're bottom turning and kind of like having to ease up on it.
Right.
And I was able to still like draw out a bottom turn, go up into the lip. The versatility of the board is pretty rad. And I tell a lot of my friends, like, hey, if you want a board, a short board, a go-to board for California, I think there's nothing better than this one here. So I got a Lightspeed 510, and I also have the Poly Subdriver 510.
Okay, so let's talk about the different constructions, right?
I've ridden this board quite a bit. You can see there's barely any pressure dings in it. One of the main changes was the old carbon wrap. The way the carbon went on the bottom, especially, is it bent through the tail. So it gave it a different flex pattern. And a lot of the team, especially the guys that compete and just like the familiarness of what they're riding, I guess the carbon wrap, it just bent different, and they just didn't seem to take to it. This one's laid up straight down the middle on both sides. This one stops like 12 inches from the tail and 12 inches from the nose. On the bottom, it goes from nose to tail, that carbon. And that mimics what a stringer would be. So it has a real similar flex pattern. And so the team, especially going from whatever board they were riding, a stringer poly, to jump to this, you get the pluses of the epoxy, which we could talk about, but it's not this total different flex bending the way it rides on a wave, which I also like. And then no stringer, it's going to have a little more flex, so it loads up and then it springs back, and it gives you that extra whip, or Matt's calling it the light speed, and it really is like speedy and just wing. It kind of gives you a cool, different, lively feel.
Right. So I noticed, my Subdriver 2.0 Lightspeed is 5.6.5, and that's 5.8. So I like it even a little bit shorter in smaller waves. I like it to fit in the pocket real quick and try and drive as much speed from turn to turn. And one of the things I noticed, and you were talking about its flex and being more consistent, I felt like the Lightspeed, not only the flex more consistent, but I have a hard time always hitting the sweet spot on the front foot or back foot being all the way back on the tail kick. And I noticed the carbon wrap would flex more, and it would cause like inconsistencies in the flex. And I was kind of like, some waves were really good and some waves were just really bad.
Yeah, I had the same.
Right?
It's
it varied, right?
Small.
Yeah. So stepping on the Lightspeed, I still have the same problems.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like the Lightspeed's a little more forgiving.
Yeah.
Where it's holding a stiffer flex. When I'm in the right spot, it's flexing and popping proper. And when I'm in the wrong spot, it might be flexing less because my stance is narrower. And that's usually where I err, a narrower stance. I don't usually go wider. Now, talking about the bottom contours, the traction and hold, the updates on the 2.0 was basically more concave in the back third of the board. So I believe it's a single to double to V out behind the fin.
Correct.
And we mentioned this already. We were talking about the center line rocker being relatively low in the tail, but it being more curvy or having more rail curve, giving it that traction and hold, right? And then you mentioned it having a hip, just you and I talking when we weren't shooting video. So maybe we could just kind of talk about that, because there's a lot going on right there that I experienced, which I think is very positive on the board.
Well, the hip with the straighter rail line here,
Yeah.
you need something to pivot off of. So giving it that hip makes that happen, so you're able to still turn really tight in the pocket. And side note, I think for me personally, I just turned 40. I like the ease of this board. A lot of the younger kids, say teenagers or 20-year-olds, all ride the driver.
Right.
But they're young, they're firing fast, they're performing in contest. I like that I could still do that on this board, but the overall ease in between it all, and it just goes. I don't have to work as hard. I love the fact that this board does that. And as we spoke earlier, I rode it in really big lowers, and all those things you just talked about, and really small Huntington, kind of all plays into what makes this board tick. And for me on the fins, I like, with all that, I like a neutral fin, which Mayhem's fin is.
Yep. And I kind of went two extreme opposites. So
which I'd actually be cool to hear what you thought.
Yeah, so in this board, the PU Poly 5.8, in bigger surf with some chop and texture, I wrote a rake template. I really like the rake template, especially on performance boards. It just seems like the go-to. There's more drive, there's more hold, and I felt like this went well together.
And especially the wave like trestles.
Yeah, with that flatter face at times, you want to create as much drive through that turn as
and
possible.
It has a nice long wall,
Right.
so you're not trying to fit it. You have time to draw things out.
Sure.
Which a rake fin would accomplish.
Absolutely. And then I put in a pivot template when the waves were a little bit smaller on this, just so I could get in the lip quicker.
Yep.
Surf it more like a beach break. Get in the lip faster. So it's funny, you and I are not even talking. I'm riding raked and pivot, and you're surfing somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
So I thought the board was very versatile, with the ability to change a little bit of its characteristics by changing the template of a fin, for sure.
I usually just stick with the neutral fin, because then I'm able to feel the board out, and it's not changing the complexity of what the board's been shaped with different fins. And then usually, depending on either what I like or don't like, I'll start messing with the fins. But for me, the neutral fin felt good, and yeah, I had a blast.
So let's look at some waves together. This is the 5.8 PU Poly. You can see it's quick rail to rail. It's got good flow. It just looks and feels a little bit long for me. Now this is the Lightspeed. Quick get up and go. Wave kind of takes off. Nice projection snap right there. You can see I can get down the line and pick my spots. Able to finish the wave pretty strong. Look at this left. This PU Poly was just knifing into the textured surf. And here's this last little wave. You can see the board's throwing good spray. It's got good flow, nice little down carve, able to finish it with a little snap. Now my final thoughts on the Subdriver 2.0 for you intermediate level surfers, 2 to 6 foot surf. This is a great high performance shortboard for you. It paddles good, it's got that quick get up and go speed, it's quick rail to rail, and it's going to take a lot less effort to get this board going compared to a typical high performance shortboard. Now for you advanced to pro level surfers, I could see this being your small wave performance board. However, for me, I find myself gravitating towards boards in this category with this lower rocker that still offers high performance surfing. This would be my high performance shortboard. I surf waves in that 1 to 6 foot range 95% of the time. Now, what fins did I prefer? Well, if I'm surfing a quick beach break, this board was real quick with the pivot set, rail to rail, and I felt like I'm fitting 2 turns quickly compared to 1 big turn with the rake template. Now, where I surf most often at the point breaks, I want to extract maximum drive when I bring this board on rail, come out of a bottom turn, and that's when I prefer the rake template. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's review on the Lost Subdriver 2.0. Special shout out thanks to Nate Yeomans for helping me with the board breakdown and Matt Biolis for sending these boards in for review. Look, if you like the show, subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and give us a thumbs up if you like our content. Until next time, we'll see you in the water. Bye-bye.